The Jussie Smollett trial has been going on over the past several days. I do want to react to the most ridiculous response to this trial that you will ever see. It makes absolutely zero sense. And this comes from BLM. Before you read that response, I want to go over very briefly the facts of the case and what we know, and why from the beginning, his claims that he was assaulted didn't really make a ton of sense. First and foremost, he says it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a frickin' polar vortex. If you recall, this was back in January 2019, and that was when there was this huge cold snap across the United States. I would know because I don't live very far from Chicago, and here it got to negative 40 degrees. Are you telling me that there were two men just sitting outside waiting for him, not knowing when he'd come out, with bleach and a noose in negative 20-degree weather, just trying to wait until he comes so they can attack him? Even at the beginning, it didn't make any sense. We come to find out, however, that they weren't strangers. They were people who Smollett had actually hired in the past. They were Nigerian brothers who he also apparently has now admitted to having a relationship with one of them. So there's that. But there are still plenty of issues with this case. The fact that throughout this entire attack, he somehow held on to his Subway sandwich and then took it back up to his hotel room, where he also still had the noose around his neck by the time the police got there. There was the fact that he didn't want to hand over his cell phone, which I can kind of understand. But when he eventually did give them information, he omitted the fact that an hour prior to this attack, he had called the brothers directly, I guess thinking that that wasn't relevant. There are plenty of issues here. So police spent thousands of hours investigating these claims, and they came to the conclusion that, hey, maybe this guy was lying about it and that he had planned it from the beginning, which seems likely. Now we go back to the actual trial happening right now, where the jury is trying to decide if they're going to convict him or not. Now, if you recall, immediately after he claimed he was attacked, there was a huge outpouring of support. For example, Kamala Harris, I believe, said that this was like a modern-day lynching. And he was basically all over the media. They couldn't stop talking about how horrible it was that white supremacists had attacked him. As more evidence came out, they started doubting this is what happened. And now I think most people recognize that it seems likely he had fabricated this entire thing. But there are some people who still believe him. The Black Lives Matter organization, for example, still supports him. And they put out what is certainly the most ridiculous statement that you will read regarding this trial. I can't even believe this is a thing, but let's go ahead. So, this is coming from Dr. Melina Abdul, who is a co-founder of BLM and a director of the BLM grassroots. So she said, as abolitionists, we approach situations of injustice with love and align ourselves with our community. That starts off fine. In an abolitionist society, this trial would not be taking place, and our communities would not have to fight and suffer to prove our worth. So in her perfect abolitionist society, I suppose as long as you are black, you can make any sort of claim whatsoever to the police, cause them to waste thousands of hours investigating your claims, and if you lied about it, no response. You shouldn't be held liable in any real way, because that's effectively what happened here. The reason he's on trial is not because he's black or anything like that. It's because there is a lot of evidence that he lied to the police and caused them to waste a lot of time, which in turn wastes taxpayer money. I think that even Democrats should recognize that wasting taxpayers' money on something like this is a bad idea, so why should we pretend that there should be no repercussions here? But it gets even worse. She says that in our commitment to abolition, we can never believe police, especially the Chicago Police Department over Jussie Smollett, a black man who has been courageously present, visible, and vocal in the struggle for black freedom. It's the phrase right here that really gets you. We can never believe police because they are committed to abolition. So this is coming once again from the Black Lives Matter organization. If you needed another reason to not support them, here you go. You can't really get more extreme than this. And this is why it always frustrated me when you had people coming out and saying defund the police, and then their defenders would say, actually, they don't mean defund the police. They mean let's cut down police funding. And sure, some people mean that. But the extremes, like Black Lives Matter, they literally mean defund the police. After all, if we can never believe police, what's the point of even having them? There isn't any. In their perfect abolitionist society, there is no police and things are they just somehow work out, I suppose. It doesn't make any logical sense, but then again, neither does this statement. So I guess they go kind of hand in hand. And if you want to learn more about how poorly this trial is going for Smollett, I would suggest you read this article from the Daily Beast. It's called Jussie Smollett Got Totally Nailed in His Cross-Examination. Now, I normally don't suggest articles from the Daily Beast, but this article I think is actually reasonably good, and they highlight a lot of the inconsistencies that Smollett claimed either now in the trial versus what had happened previously. There were just a bunch of issues with his testimony. So they do a good job here explaining that. As of the time of this recording, we don't know if he's yet been convicted because the jury is still deliberating. But it could happen any minute now or any day. We honestly have no idea how long it could take. But I'm sure it's coming up, and hopefully they at least find him somewhat guilty, because it does seem like he fabricated this entire thing, lied to police, which is not something you should encourage or allow in our society.